My family has recently been trying to push me out of my own home in Chicago so that my older sister, Carolyn, and her husband could move in with their 4 children. Their argument that I, being a single 31-year-old man, don't need all that space and that it would make much more sense if I relocated to a small studio or even lived in a camper behind the house. Carolyn is 33, and she's been having kids back to back since she was 25. Now they've got 4 little ones, all under the age of 8. Her husband, Ethan, works long shifts as a mechanic, and Carolyn hasn't held a job since graduating college. She insists she has her hands full with motherhood, though my mother spends at least 3 days a week babysitting for her. To be honest, Carolyn and I have never gotten along. She has a way of turning the smallest disagreement into full-blown drama. If I so much as roll my eyes at one of her snide remarks, she instantly bursts into tears and accuses me of being cruel. My parents, especially my dad, fall for it every single time, showering her with sympathy while I get cast as the ungrateful, bitter sibling. The truth is, Carolyn is charming when she wants to be. She's beautiful, knows how to turn on the sweetness in public, and has everyone convinced she's the saintly mother of the year. But I've seen the other side, manipulative, entitled, and fully aware of how to bend my parents to her will. Now, with their cramped two-bedroom apartment feeling too small for their growing family, she's set her sights on my home. And somehow, my parents think this is a reasonable plan. I didn't just stumble into owning a 3-bedroom house in Chicago. It took years of grinding, saving, and sacrificing while everyone else was out living their carefree 20s. When I was in college, I worked part-time jobs on top of a full course load. Summers that my friends spent backpacking in Europe or partying at music festivals, I spent sweating in kitchens, delivering food, and fixing up used cars to flip for a little extra cash. After graduation, while Carolyn was busy planning her dream wedding that my parents basically funded, I was stuck paying off my student loans. I cut corners everywhere, living with 3 roommates in a cramped apartment, taking the bus instead of owning a car, skipping nights out, and surviving mostly on ramen and instant coffee. I didn't complain, I just kept telling myself that one day it would be worth it. At 27, I finally scraped together enough for a down payment. The house isn't huge by suburban standards, but in Chicago it's a dream. 3 bedrooms, a little backyard, and a garage I've slowly been turning into a workshop. It's mine. Every dollar, every blister, every long night went into it. That's why it stings when my parents act like the house is some kind of spare resource that I don't really deserve. They keep saying things like, "You're young, you can always get another place," or "Carolyn has kids, you don't, so she needs it more." But here's the thing, they didn't help me buy it. Not 1 cent, not 1 signature on a loan, nothing. This house isn't just a building. It's the symbol of years of sacrifices nobody else was willing to make. So when they suggest I hand it over to my sister, it feels like a slap in the face. The pressure didn't stop at that first conversation. It kept building, little by little, in ways that felt less like suggestions and more like ultimatums wrapped in guilt. One evening, over dinner at my parents' house, my mom brought it up again. "Alex, don't you think it's selfish to hold on to so much space when your sister and the kids are struggling? Carolyn's apartment is tiny, and the boys barely have room to play." I put down my fork, staring at her. "Mom, it's not so much space. It's my home. I worked for it." My dad chimed in, his voice stern, like I was some teenager being scolded. "You don't understand what family means. Family sacrifices. Carolyn needs stability for her kids more than you need a garage full of tools." That one hit me hard. A garage full of tools, that's how little they think of my effort. They reduce years of struggle, of clawing my way into homeownership, to some hobbyist shed. Carolyn sat there quietly, not defending me, not even looking embarrassed. She just sipped her wine, eyes lowered, letting them argue on her behalf. I Felt the heat rising in my chest, so let me get this straight. You want me to just give her my house and what? Move back into an apartment? Start all over again? My mom's expression hardened. It's just a house, Alex. You're single. You'll bounce back. But your sister has responsibilities. That word, just a house, nearly made me laugh. To them, maybe it's just bricks and walls. To me, it's everything I've been fighting for. In that moment, I realized something I never wanted to admit. To my parents, Carolyn would always come first. And I was just expendable. The strangest part was how quickly the narrative spread. It wasn't just my parents bringing it up anymore, it started creeping into conversations with extended family, even friends. At a cousin's birthday party, someone joked, "Hey Alex, when are you moving out so Carolyn can finally stretch her legs?" Everyone laughed like it was harmless. I forced a smile, but inside I was boiling. At work, one of my coworkers, who somehow had heard about the situation, said, "Man, I'd give up my place for my sister in a heartbeat." Family's family, you know, he meant well, but the implication was clear. I was the selfish one. I started noticing the way people looked at me. Aunts with raised eyebrows, neighbors making small comments about Carolyn being such a devoted mother. It felt like I'd been cast as the villain in a play I never agreed to perform in. Meanwhile, every time I went home, the silence in my house felt heavier. I'd walk past the living room, the kitchen, the little patio I'd decorated with string lights, and all I could think was, they want to take this from me. I wasn't sleeping much. At night, I lay awake, replaying arguments in my head, thinking of all the ways I could defend myself, and then realizing none of it mattered because no one was actually listening. It hit me one evening, sitting alone in my living room. I was completely isolated. My parents were against me, my sister was silent, and even people outside my family saw me as the problem. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the fact that no one seemed to care what losing it would mean for me.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.
One evening, I decided I couldn't take the guessing anymore. Carolyn was sitting at the dining table, scrolling on her phone, while her son played with toy cars on the floor. "Can we talk?" I asked. My voice sounded strained, even to me. She looked up, polite smile plastered on her face. "Of course, Alex. What's on your mind?" I hesitated, then went straight to it. "Do you want my house? Is that what this is all about?" Her smile faltered just slightly, but she quickly recovered. "What? No, don't be ridiculous. I think Mom and Dad are worried about me. You know how parents are. Carolyn," I pressed. "Everyone seems to think I should hand it over. I need to hear it from you. Are you behind this?" She gave a soft laugh, almost dismissive, and shook her head. "You're overthinking. I'm not trying to take anything from you. Honestly, I don't know why they're making such a fuss." Her words should have calmed me, but they didn't. There was something to smooth about the way she said them, like she'd rehearsed the lines. She didn't deny she needed more space, didn't mention finding her own place, just pushed the blame back on our parents. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but the knot in my stomach only tightened. Was she lying? Or was I letting paranoia twist everything? That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had slipped through my fingers. She hadn't admitted anything, but she hadn't reassured me either. It felt like I was trapped in a game where everyone knew the rules except me. A few days later, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet, except for faint voices drifting up from the kitchen. Curious, I padded halfway down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. It was Carolyn. Her voice was low but sharp, carrying just enough for me to catch pieces of the conversation. "He doesn't even use half the space. It's just sitting there. Meanwhile, I'm stuck with a kid and barely enough room." My stomach clenched. Then I heard my mother sigh. "I know, honey, but you have to be patient. Alex has always been attached to that house. "It won't be easy." Carolyn's reply came fast, edged with frustration. "I need that space." "He's selfish, Mom. He doesn't even realize how unfair this is." I froze, gripping the railing. The blood roared in my ears. They weren't just worried parents like she'd claimed. They were actively plotting. And Carolyn was the one feeding the fire. My father's voice entered then, stern but calm. "Give it time. He'll come around eventually. Don't push him too hard." There was a pause. I could almost picture Carolyn's expression, tight-lipped, unsatisfied. I crept back upstairs before they noticed me. My hands were trembling. The truth was undeniable now. She did want my house. She'd been gaslighting me, pretending to be innocent, all while poisoning our parents against me. But the worst part wasn't that they believed her. It was how natural she sounded, how convincing. For a moment, even I wondered if maybe I was the selfish one. No, I shook that thought away. She was playing a game and I was finally seeing the cards on the table. For the rest of that week, I pretended everything was normal. When Carolyn smiled at me across the dinner table, I smiled back. When she asked about work, I answered politely, as if I hadn't overheard her calling me selfish behind my back. But inside, something had shifted. Every word she said, every glance she threw my way, I analyzed. It was like I had put on new glasses and could suddenly see the cracks in her performance. She laughed hard at my father's jokes. She touched my mother's arm when she wanted agreement. She framed every complaint like she was the victim, and they bought it. I realized if I confronted her now, I'd look paranoid. They'd say I was overreacting, twisting her words. That was her power. She was always just subtle enough to deny it later. So I decided to wait, to watch, to collect every tiny detail, every inconsistency. At night, I lay awake replaying conversations, cataloging them in my head like evidence in a trial. The kitchen whispers, the fake tears, the way she always shifted blame. Sometimes I caught myself almost admiring her skill. She was manipulative, yes, but meticulous. A professional liar, but admiration quickly turned to anger. This was my home, my family. And she was turning them against me, one careful word at a time. The longer I stayed silent, the more suffocating it became. I felt like a stranger in my own house, every corner echoing with her influence. Still, I bit my tongue, because if I was going to fight Carolyn, I couldn't just lash out. I had to be smarter, sharper. I had to beat her at her own game. I started keeping a notebook. At first, it felt ridiculous, scribbling down fragments of overheard conversations, subtle expressions, shifts in tone. But the more I wrote, the clearer the pattern became. April 10th, 7:45 p.m. Carolyn said she had a migraine, but later I saw her on the phone laughing in the kitchen. April 12th to 15 p.m. She told my father she canceled the plumber, but I found the receipt for the service in the trash. April 14th, 9 a.m., she mentioned she was alone all morning, yet my neighbor saw her car leave at 8:30. Piece by piece, the facade crumbled on paper. During family dinners, I would watch her spin stories with effortless charm, then excuse myself to the bathroom just to jot down a detail before it slipped away. It was like I was living in two worlds, the one she controlled and the one I was documenting. Some nights, I stared at the growing pile of notes and asked myself, what's the end game? Confronting her too soon would backfire, exposing her without proof would make me look bitter, unstable. But if I waited long enough, with enough evidence, there would be no way out for her. I started thinking less like a betrayed partner and more like a prosecutor preparing for trial. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was strategic. And strangely, that gave me power. Carolyn thought she was scripting the story of this family, casting herself as the sympathetic heroine and me as the selfish obstacle. But what she didn't know was that I was writing my own version. And when the moment came, mine would be the only version anyone could believe. The proof came by accident. Carolyn left her phone on the coffee table one afternoon while she went upstairs to take a shower. Normally, she guarded it like a soldier, always face down, always locked, but this time the screen lit up when a notification buzzed. I wasn't planning to touch it. I had promised myself I wouldn't sink that low. But curiosity isn't something you can chain once it's loose. Her gallery app was still open. The last photo she had looked at was right there. My stomach dropped. It was a selfie Carolyn, sitting in the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize, leaning in close to someone whose face was cropped out, but whose arm was unmistakably wrapped around her shoulders. The intimacy in that frame told a story no caption could disguise. I stared at it for so long I thought my vision would blur. The sounds of the shower running upstairs felt like thunder in the distance, each drop counting down to the moment she would come back and catch me holding her secret. I forced myself to breathe, snapped a quick picture of the screen with my own phone, and carefully set hers back down exactly where she had left it. When she came downstairs minutes later, towel-dried hair framing her face, she smiled at me like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't living a double life. I smiled back. Inside, though, something hardened. The notebook had been theory, patterns, suspicions. But this was undeniable. It was the first real crack in the mask. And now I knew. All I had to do was keep pressing until the whole thing shattered. The proof came by accident. Carolyn left her phone on the coffee table one afternoon while she went upstairs to take a shower. Normally, she guarded it like a soldier, always face down, always locked. But this time, the screen lit up when a notification buzzed. I wasn't planning to touch it. I had promised myself I wouldn't sink that low. But curiosity isn't something you can chain once it's loose. Her gallery app was still open. The last photo she had looked at was right there. My stomach dropped. It was a selfie Carolyn, sitting in the passenger seat of a car I didn't recognize, leaning in close to someone whose face was cropped out, but whose arm was unmistakably wrapped around her shoulders. The intimacy in that frame told a story no caption could disguise. I stared at it for so long I thought my vision would blur. The sounds of the shower running upstairs felt like thunder in the distance, each drop counting down to the moment she would come back and catch me holding her secret. I forced myself to breathe, snapped a quick picture of the screen with my own phone, and carefully set hers back down exactly where she had left it. When she came downstairs minutes later, towel dried, hair framing her face, she smiled at me like nothing had changed. Like she wasn't living a double life. I smiled back. Inside, though, something hardened. The notebook had been theory, patterns, suspicions. But this was undeniable. It was the first real crack in the mask, and now I knew. All I had to do was keep pressing until the whole thing shattered. Confrontation would have been the easy choice. I could have stormed into the kitchen, waved that photo in Carolyn's face, and demanded answers. But what would that give me? Tears, excuses, lies carefully rehearsed. She was too good at performance. No, I needed to be smarter. That single photo was a spark. I needed a fire. For days, I replayed it in my mind, forcing myself not to slip up, not to let the venom inside me leak into my voice. Around her, I was still the affectionate partner. I still asked about her day, brought her coffee, even kissed her forehead before bed. But underneath, every smile was a mask stretched tight across clenched teeth. I started looking at her differently. Every trip she took to yoga class, every night she said she had to work late became another breadcrumb. I began tracking her routine, writing down when she left, when she came home, how long she was gone. Then I set traps. Tiny ones, questions I knew she'd stumble over. How was yoga? I'd ask casually, when I already knew she hadn't been at the studio. She'd blink for half a second to long before answering, and that flicker of hesitation was fuel to my growing fire. Meanwhile, I copied the photo I had onto a hidden drive, labeling it with the kind of precision one might reserve for evidence. In court, because that's what it was, evidence, the plan was forming, solidifying in the back of my mind. This wasn't about catching her any more I already had. It was about building the perfect storm. And when the storm finally hit, I wanted her to lose everything. It started with small coincidences, texts she thought I wouldn't see, calls she left on silent. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing, maybe work, maybe friends. But the unease in my stomach was relentless. One evening, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. The lock was still set to fingerprint, and she hadn't logged out of the messaging app on the tablet. That was my moment. Messages popped up, casual at first. Missed you today turned into can't wait to see you again. Names I didn't recognize, times that didn't add up. My heart raced, but I didn't panic. I had to stay calm. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, even screenshots of locations she claimed she was at but wasn't. My notes became meticulous, a timeline forming with surgical precision. Then came the photos. Tiny details I had overlooked. A scarf in the corner of her camera roll, the reflection of someone in the background, a street name that didn't match where she said she'd been. Each photo was a thread. I started connecting them. By the end of the week, I had enough to know exactly who he was. I didn't confront her yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I started planning how to handle it legally, publicly, and in a way that would leave no room for denial. Every day, I kept my composure, smiling, making dinner, even laughing at her jokes. But inside, I was calculating. Each lie she told fed the fire. Each slip she made was another piece of evidence in my growing dossier. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about clarity, about making sure the truth could never be denied. When the time came, it would hit like a tidal wave, and I would be ready. The night finally came. I asked her to sit down, calmly, like nothing was wrong. She laughed nervously, expecting another one of my moods or minor complaints. I placed the tablet and my notes on the table. The timeline, the messages, the photos, all of it. Her laughter died immediately. I could see the panic in her eyes, the realization that this wasn't something she could charm or spin. I know everything, I said quietly, letting my words hang in the air. Every lie, every meeting, every excuse you made, I have proof. She tried to argue, to deny, but the evidence was undeniable. Each screenshot, each message, each timestamp countered her words. She faltered. Her composure crumbled like a house of cards. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. I shook my head. It is exactly what it looks like. And it's over. I could see the shock, then guilt, then desperation flash across her face. She tried to plead, tried to cry, but I had already made up my mind. There was no going back. I packed my things that evening, taking only what I needed. My home felt lighter, somehow, without the weight of lies and betrayal. The camper that once felt like a prison now symbolized independence and resilience. I didn't need to explain to anyone. I didn't need anyone's sympathy. I had stood up for myself, protected my life, and reclaimed my space. The next morning, I changed the locks and sent one final message. This chapter is closed. Don't contact me again. For the first time in months, I slept without tension, without fear. I had survived the manipulation, the lies, and the chaos. My life was mine again. And in that quiet, I realized something essential. No one, not family, not a partner, not anyone has the right to take your life, your space, or your peace. You have to fight for it, and when you do, the world suddenly feels a lot more yours.
Subscribe to the channel and like this video.